Okay, starting the clock. Day is still November 22nd. Time is 10:59. Let's do these last 2 hours of community service for the day so I can get onto other things. Want to go on a store run, pick up maybe a snack or two, check the mail, drop off my Netflix movies. So, yeah. Oh, my fucking head. I'm starting to get a headache. I should probably take another aspirin. Okay. Testicles one, two, testicles. Testing, testing. Testes, testes. One, two, testes. Okay, let's get back to these stories and let's get back to this drawing.
It was only about 5 feet away from the window when we both saw each other, making full eye contact. It was frightening. I do not know for sure what I saw, and my wife is just as certain that she saw it also. I have never seen any type of creature that resembled this thing before in my life, and hope to never see one again. Obviously, Officer Torgan here isn't alone, as I just shared my own personal experience. There are things out there that defy the world we live in. Maybe shows like X-Files and Twilight Zone had it right. "1973. Officer Lamek reported a terrifying sighting of what he believes to be the legendary Mothman. His sighting occurred on Highway 51. Suddenly, in front of him, right above a slow-moving car, was the figure of a man with his wings folded in across his back. The wings appeared to be leathery in texture, like a bat's, and were even pointed on the ends. A sort of sting protruded from the creature's beltline. Officer Lamek stopped his car and tried to get out when he saw the creature taking off flight at an incredible speed. The officer described it as follows. It stood between 6 and 7 feet tall, had a wingspan over 14 feet wide from tip to tip, and large glowing red eyes. It flew at an angle towards the east. It made no noise other than a whooshing sound like air through its wings. It had claws on its feet and something on its back, looking like two cylinders. Officer Lamek reported his sighting to the local PD, where he was laughed at, ridiculed, and finally forced into early retirement for psychological reasons. The officer was told that if he reported another sighting of this kind, he would be brought up on charges of mental instability. It's interesting to note that Lamek is extremely well respected within the community. He's an upstanding member of society with no history of family or personal mental illness or alcoholism. He is very much a regular guy with a wife and kids. This has been one hard creature to research due to the reluctance of people involved in the case that are willing to talk about it. We immediately went and checked the area where he think we initially came across something which was just a short distance away. The road in which he saw it circles around, comes back up on the top of itself in an oval-like shape with gravel roads going up in different areas of the farm. We were not able to find anything, but even my son said he thinks he saw something by one of those houses. It's no longer there, but maybe even a garden plot that had been abandoned long ago. The land has been farmed for probably decades now, before being converted into pasture land. The entire sighting lasted approximately 3 seconds, from him seeing it while driving until fully gone. Since the sight was airborne, from his recollection, it was extremely large, stood right next to a tree. He saw eye shine, and the eyes were large, as well with what appeared to be claws on its feet. The creature had long hair or fur all over it. Most of him was covered by something that he said appeared like a cape, or wings even, covering most of its body length. He could not tell if they were webbed, but they were definitely something attached to it, which we may have thought. He is 100% positive he saw this, and is actually very shaken up about it, since he clearly has no explanation for it. His car stopped working immediately after the sighting, so we believe there is some sort of electrical interference occurring at the time. He believes it stood about 7 foot tall, dark in color, wings folded across its back, and extended like a stingray. His car stopped working after it took off into the air at an angle towards the eastern direction. But due to the electrical interference with his radio, which was turned off at the time of the sighting, which is also noted with other Mothman encounters, we were not able to find any evidence of anything, but we both believe he saw something and would like to help finding what he saw. "2008, San Antonio, Texas. A police officer..."
Oh, I'm not even paying attention to these stories. Just my head feels better, but it's just having like a big bowl of mutton stew. Oh my god! I served myself so much because last night I didn't serve myself as much because my stomach is so small nowadays that I can't really eat all too much. But this morning, or like an hour or so ago, when I took my break, I figured, like, you know what? I'm going to serve myself a regular hearty bowl of this mutton stew. So I did, and it's like more or less like the same amount that I would serve myself before my stomach shrank, and I think my eyes were a bit bigger than my stomach. I am so full of mutton stew right now, but it was so good. It's like mutton stew is like always good, but I don't know. Like this batch of mutton stew is just delicious. So I opted to serve myself a bit more, and I am just full of stew right now, and I'm feeling it, feeling the itis come over me. It's like I just want to lie down and let this food settle. Oh, because it's so good. Oh, but I can't. Let me just finish. Oh, finish this community service and be done with it for the day, so I can get on to other things. But man, oh, mutton stew, so fucking good. All right.
Was driving alone on patrol one night when he heard a loud thumping sound.
Melody says stew with dumplings is amazing. Yes, especially mutton stew with dumplings. It's like we use the same bread that we use for fry bread, and just kind of like just wad it up into these little tiny dumplings and throw it into the stew and cook it that way. Oh, it's so good, so fucking good. But that's not the stew we had last night. But it's still freaking amazing. Melody says, "Ooh, yeah, that's a snooze attack waiting to happen." Yes, it is. It's it's attacking me right now. Trying to trying to stay awake. Anyway, back to this.
Coming from the back of a squad car. He stopped, got out to investigate, and then suddenly had an unexpected encounter with a creature that resembled both man and beast. The bizarre encounter left him frightened and shaken. This is what he claims to have experienced. I was on patrol in a new district that I was not familiar with. It was around 2:20 a.m. I just...
Okay, for this storyboard sheet, I'm just going to keep these as is, just to mark that he's walking. And I have these little tally marks for his feet here, as you can see, for the front of his like left and right foot, and just mark off like the steps he'll be taking. And I put like one of these positions down where he's going to be reaching up and like grabbing some corn. And I'm just going to leave that all sketched out like that. So then when I bring it into the animation program, I can just have it more or less plotted out as it is right here and just animate from it. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this storyboard sheet, well, not quite done because I still have to do the background. But let's see, which background is it? This one. So I'm just gonna, let's see, copy this background and paste it right here. I gotta fill them in with some color too. I think it's warm enough in here. I can shut that off. Yeah, back to the
Just
stories.
finished checking several convenience stores when I heard a loud thumping sound coming from the back of my vehicle. I immediately pulled over to investigate. As I got out of the car, something large began to run through the woods across.
Melody's sending me funny gifts. Melody says, we make full fist-sized dumplings. Nice. And she also says, I like his old man yells at cloud post. Just to get a sense of what she's talking about, let me just pull that up here. Oh, it's taking me to the actual website. Old man yells at cloud. Nice. All right.
The street towards me from behind. I thought it was a person for a quick second, but as it got closer, I realized it wasn't. And whatever this thing was, it was actually running on all fours. I couldn't believe what I saw. The being was hairy and had the body of a man, but the head of a wolf. It also appeared at first to be in some sort of costume or uniform, but I realized that was just how hairy it was. It stopped moving about 30 feet in front of me and stared me down, sizing me up. I was so frightened I couldn't move. I laid on my car horn for several minutes, hoping somebody would come to my aid, but nobody did. This thing began to charge at me, so I drove off. I didn't feel comfortable sharing this with anybody. Most people wouldn't have believed me or thought I was crazy. But now that so many sightings are being reported all over the world, I decided it was time to share what happened to me and hope that other officers feel comfortable coming forward. 2001, the Navajo Reservation.
Uh-oh.
A mysterious sighting of a humanoid figure
Navajo
which is
story.
similar to the famous Mothman. According to this Navajo witness, his name was Jerry Garcia. He had been on duty with his partner when they saw a white human-like standing on top of a mesa rock near Shiprock, New Mexico.
Whoops.
The flashing light revealed a skull-shaped head and glowing eyes that were very large. The jaw was covered in long white hairs. The humanoid figure stood 8 feet tall and had a wingspan of almost 12 feet after it ascended into the sky. It took about 3 steps, flapped its wings once, and flew off over the horizon at over 80 miles per hour. So what is this? Is this another Mothman-related sighting, or something different? The Navajo are no doubt one of the most famous tribes in U.S. history. Could their land be home to many unknown terrifying creatures that reside in not just forests, but also remote lands? Please leave your thoughts below this case. Alleged secret government facility in Hawaii. being used to train psychic special operations units. 1991, a former employee from an alleged secret government facility in Hawaii has gone on record to describe what has been going on there for years now. A classified unit that deploys psychic warriors trained in remote viewing into other realities and timelines where humans have apparently never existed before. These claims come from William Edgar, an alleged former employee who says he went to the facility in the late 80s to work there. He claims that all military personnel are trained in psychic warfare. They can be deployed into other timelines and universes using clairvoyance and precognition abilities to accomplish their missionary goals. According to this whistleblower, the US government has found a way for classified military units to travel interdimensionally by tricking biophysical bodies into having an out-of-body experience while leaving their physical body behind. The secret government is doing this in order to harness the power of time and space by accessing these other universes that exist in what scientists call the same space, but not the same time. When an individual is said to have left their body, they are believed to be in a state known as the biophysical phase. According to conspiracy theory lore, once you leave your physical form behind, you can walk through walls and even fly. You can even travel into different timelines or parallel universes where everything is possible, especially traveling back in a time before human civilization was created on Earth. And Mr. Edgar claims that people are being recruited from our top universities all across America, many students showing great potential for having psychic abilities due to their age. These recruits are put through rigorous training programs to hone in their abilities before being sent on field missions. Edgar was killed shortly after releasing this information from a fatal car accident in 1993. The Hawaiian government and United States government have quickly responded and dismissed all claims as ridiculous and absurd. 1985. A bad storm had just passed through Burlington County when Officer A.J. Quinn spotted something hovering over Route 130, which runs between Burlington and Bordentown. On June 20th, at approximately 6:40 p.m., I was traveling on Route 563, south of Chatsworth, near the Franklin Parker Reserve Speedwell entrance. I was looking to see what the parking situation there was for future hikes, so my eyes were on the right side of the road when out of the periphery, I saw what I thought was a groundhog on the left. At least, it looked like it. It was very large. I realized it would have been huge for one to be like that. So the size I saw was roughly 4 feet tall, standing on two legs. It reminded me physically of a groundhog. I did not get a good look at the face, and I almost continued to decide to turn around about 150 yards up on a dirt road to the right. I pulled in, turned around, and headed back to that location. There is a bend in the road there. It bends around to the right, and on the way back, as I made it past the bend, approximately 30 yards in front of me, the creature was still there. It was now fully turned towards me. I could see that it looked like a cross between Curious George and the character Chaka from the Land of the Lost. Its face and hands, as well as the tops of its feet, were hairless and light tan in color. The fur it was covered with was golden brown, a little darker than a golden retriever, very much like the color of a groundhog. I could not see the nose. When I locked eyes with it, I could see just the whites. I stood there for a second or two when I rounded the bend, and then took off past back into the swampy area. It ducked behind a short bush. When I drove past it, I could no longer see it. I turned the car around yet again, and when I went by a second time, it was gone. I waited there a bit to see if I could see anything moving in the field. I couldn't, so I considered it done and took off. It was a couple of days before I shared the experience with my family and friends. In that period of time, I thought for sure somebody was going to report a missing kid in a Halloween costume. When the thing took off running, it was fast. I would describe it as the fastest kid on the 10-12 baseball team. We had really bad storms that night, and my commute was a disaster. It poured all through that area, and I thought it was odd that the thing I saw appeared to be dry. At least its fur was, which would lead me to believe it was under some sort of covering or underground. Of course, there are always skeptics out there suggesting this type of ferocious cryptid is just some innocent child dressed up in a puffy Halloween costume on Hallows Eve. But why would it be out there, of all places? Or maybe Officer A.J. Quinn simply mistook an actual groundhog for something bipedal. Unfortunately, for those skeptics and doubters,
nuts.
A.J. Quinn is a legitimate officer who was on duty at the time of the sighting and has never been known to
Damn it.
misled. Over the years,
I was
there have
covering
been
with the wrong
reports of other
layer.
sightings in this area of Bordentown, New Jersey, where the creature is said to dwell. Still, others suggest that terrifying entities, as the winged humanoid and red eyes, are merely overactive imaginations that produce nothing more than tall tales and fictitious stories about little green men from Mars, or aggressive Bigfoot-like creatures with pointy ears and glowing eyes. Crazy UFO accounts and outlandish conspiracy theories aside, Officer A.J. Quinn's frightening account of his eyewitness experience in Bordentown, New Jersey, is simply evidence that he and other witnesses did truly see something unusual and terrifying. A police officer was critically injured after being attacked by a large and powerful unknown creature. The attack took place one night in an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. A close friend and colleague of the victim describes what he witnessed that night. I was there with him. We were searching the building for a suspect when all of a sudden, something came rushing out of one of the rooms. It knocked me off my feet when I got back up. He was being attacked by this monster. He was much stronger than anything I had seen. He was able to throw Jeff 10 feet in the air with ease. I pulled out my firearm, firing it several times, but it wouldn't budge an inch. Like the bullets didn't even bother it. I don't know what happened after that. I blacked out for several moments. When I came to, the creature had already disappeared and Jeff was unconscious, badly injured and bleeding, with a head injury and broken ribs. The victim describes how he was seeing his partner pointing his firearm at an unknown creature. Jeff felt his gun jam when he looked up. The unknown being seemed to disappear in front of him. Jeff went to check on his partner and found him not breathing. The victim was able to regain consciousness, but quickly collapsed again shortly thereafter. Police officers were immediately dispatched to the scene. They took both men to a nearby hospital for treatment. Both sustained serious injuries and were unable to work for several months during the recovery period. 1980. A Navajo officer says he
Another
encountered a
Navajo.
white skeletal creature on the Navajo Indian Reservation in Arizona.
Ooh.
The officer and two others said they encountered the thing one night as they were patrolling the desert near Shiprock. I thought it was a
Shiprock.
bear or some other kind of animal,
That's where I'm
said
going
Joe
tomorrow.
Bailey, now an investigator for the tribe's Division of Public Safety. It looked like something with high cheekbones and deep set-in eyes. It had shorter arms, but its front legs were short. Bailey says he didn't realize it wasn't an animal until he got out of his patrol car to investigate. Noticed and heard the footfalls echoing off to either side. He also noticed that there were no tracks. Bailey says the creature was nearly 7 feet. The other two witnesses, who requested anonymity, also said the animal was hairless and had carroty red eyes. Bailey said it was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. He added that he felt a sensation akin to pins and needles when he looked at it. It disappeared before reaching a telephone booth. Bailey claims that he contacted Navajo Tribal Police Chief Samuel Pete about his experience after reading newspaper accounts of sightings in northeastern Arizona, right near the Navajo Mountain. This is where others have reported seeing a giant man with white skin that leaves no tracks or scent behind.
Weird.
The report also went on to include a local scientist's theory that the animal was potentially a genetic aberration, resulting from nuclear experiments in nearby Area 51, or quite possibly a descendant of species of bear known to have been in the area thousands of years ago, a few days before Bailey's alleged encounter. Two other Navajo officers had reported seeing a huge hairless dog that stood up about 5 feet tall. This is in the same vicinity on July 4th. One Leland Joe saw an unidentified 5 foot tall being with white skin and glowing green eyes running across a field, again leaving no tracks. Also, a retired military man said he saw another creature one night. His car suddenly stopped mid-drive for no apparent reason, suffering from electronic issues. He turned off the ignition, turned on the lights to find that he was surrounded by several of these beings. These beings reportedly had glowing green eyes and fang-like teeth. They surrounded his car. He screamed and they appeared to just disintegrate into the air. As soon as they did, his entire car shot on again, and he was able to say,
I just put two and two together. I was like saying, no, not Jeff. Jeff the killer. Ugh. After like hearing so much about Jeff the killer, this and that, and the creepy pasta, whatever, like I went ahead and finally like listened to it one time, and like listening to it is like what sort of angsty high schooler wrote this? Mm. It's like the character itself, like the illustrations or whatever, are kind of were kind of neat, but then after hearing the story, it's just like, oh man, it was bad. Well, I thought so at least. But yeah, no more Jeff the Killer, please.
successfully drive away. We're not exactly sure what we're dealing with, but there is something definitely supernatural lingering in the state of Arizona.
I was like, how could they do that to Jeff? He had so much to live for.
September 1st, 2012. A police officer from the area I live in was patrolling Route 563 2 weeks ago and saw a 7 foot tall, goblin like creature standing right next to a tree around 1:45 in the morning. He pulled over and the thing took off running. He chased it for almost a mile before it disappeared into the thin air. It was vomit green color, with short horns on top of its head and large red eyes. That eye shine was activated by car headlights. The officer said that he could see the eyes and they were definitely red. The officer also says that it appeared to have a short tail, very muscular arms and legs, like a runner or a wrestler, and had a very reptilian like appearance, even though it was most certainly bipedal. There was another officer who had a similar sighting back in 1989. He says that he was traveling at about 2 in the morning, and he saw what he estimated to be a 6 foot tall, a green reptilian creature standing next to the road. He slowed down to get a closer look at it before running off. I'm not sure what to make of all this, if anything, but I felt compelled to share my story. It could be connected to others out there who've had similar experiences. The area in Franklin Park is not far from Route 563, and it's deep in the woods where nobody really goes anymore, unless they know somebody who lives back there. It didn't surprise me. I've heard several stories over the years about people seeing things like Bigfoots, Sasquatches. Back when I was in high school, I had my own sighting of something like this, so things like that didn't really bother me too much. I consider myself to have thick skin. My friends and I saw two hairy black tall figures crossing the road. They were much taller than an average human, only they weren't apes, nor were they completely human either. It was hard to make out exactly what they were due to the moonlight being behind them and shining in our eyes so much we couldn't see the exact detail, but their size was considerable, at minimum 7 feet. Do you have any insight to what these creatures are? Is there more than one? Can you tell me if they are somehow related to the chupacabra or other known cryptids that exist? Thank you for all your work. At approximately 7:04 p.m., Officer Linda Seabrook was driving home from work on the Garden State Parkway when she saw a human-like creature that can only be described as gargoyle-like, having dark reddish skin and scaly reptilian wings. Officer Seabrook stated her disbelief in fact that such things even existed, but remains adamant of what she had seen. Officer Scott Kimball had a sighting of a gargoyle reptilian on Route 33 near Union at approximately 4:35 a.m. Police officer Scott Kimball was making his usual patrol rounds on Route 33 near the town of Union when he happened to see what could only be
Professor
described as a
Scott
gargoyle.
Kimball.
The creature stood nearly 6 foot tall, scaly, wings protruding from its back. Its face had the general shape of a human, but with larger than normal eyes and canine teeth. When it landed briefly on top of an abandoned building, Officer Kimball could make out the creature's tail, which was approximately 5 feet in length.
Officer
Police
Kimball.
dispatch receives calls of gargoyle sighting in Cherry Hill Township at also approximately 8:43. The dispatch received multiple calls coming into their office reporting something that looked like a gargoyle atop one of the buildings located along Haddonfield Road. According to the witnesses, they too described a creature standing nearly 7 feet tall, with wings that were large and bat-like behind the shoulders. The wingspan itself was estimated to be around 13 feet across. Other witnesses have sightings of reptilian humanoids in the Pennsauken Township at approximately 3:17 a.m. Multiple witnesses called into the PD to report what they can only be described as a strange flying reptilian creature. They said it had red glowing eyes, large wings, and massive black talons. 2010, right around 5:30 a.m., Officer Blacksmith received a call about a hulking figure seen lurking about near the intersection of US 2 and 41. He arrived at the scene to discover that a female motorist had witnessed the creature crossing in front of her vehicle as she traveled along US 2 into town. Additionally, Officer Blacksmith talked with two hunters who had also seen the same creature. The first hunter stated that he was nearly run off the road by it, while the other told him directly that he had encountered it firsthand. The witnesses are all experienced hunters familiar with what they should be seeing out there in order to safely navigate their way through these woods, all during deer season. One witness specifically said that he has never seen anything like this before, but it definitely was not human. It was massive. It was black or really dark brown. I could not tell what direction it was headed. It all happened so fast. Officer Blacksmith described the area near where he made contact with the witness as being very wet and overgrown, lots of thick underbrush. He also said that it's known to be an area where hunters have complained about encountering strange phenomena while out in the woods during hunting season. Blacksmith stated that normally when he receives calls like this, they come from local townspeople who are also unfamiliar with the territory, making them easily identifiable when spotted by officers on patrol. Blacksmith went on to state that these two specific eyewitnesses were definitely not locals. Having spent most of their lives living in part of the Upper Peninsula, he said that his well over a decade of patrolling the area, he's never had to respond to something like this before, although it's no doubt harvested his interest in researching and hunting these reported creatures. 1999, reports of a large bipedal canine resembling a hyena have been reported around Grand Rapids in the lower peninsula of Michigan. Officer Blackburn reports his incident. February 2nd, 1999. I responded to a call for an unidentified animal spotted on King Highway near Riesland Drive in Comstock Park, since we serve the entire county. The witnesses said that they were driving when they saw something run across the road and into some nearby woods. They described it as about 6 feet tall, black fur, and a long tail that was moving quickly. Its movements were very fluid and similar to that of a kangaroo. They kept expecting to see it jump over a ditch, but it never did. The one thing they were sure of was that it ran on two legs. I went into the wooded area. he immediately began seeing tracks in the snow. I followed them for about 15 minutes, until I lost them at a steep embankment. There was no way anyone could scale that bank with feet like those, about 20 inches long, massive canine feet, without using their hands, too. It should be noted that these sounds are heard during daylight hours only, and thus far, there has been no sighting of what would be construed as Bigfoot during darkness, which is considered very unusual, if indeed this creature exists, as most Bigfoot sightings occur at night or dusk and dawn conditions. Witnesses have been exclusively rural residents. They claim to have been hunting, hiking, etc., when they heard the sounds and then spotted a large bipedal canine figure in their vicinity. It really makes you wonder. An unknown bipedal canine was reported being sighted by a police officer just west of Highway 164 in Richfield, Wisconsin. On July 18th, 2021, 8:30 p.m., a police officer who will remain anonymous was driving eastbound on Pleasant Hill Road, roughly 1.5 miles west of Highway 164 in Richfield. He caught something moving just off the side of the road. He slowed down to have a look and got out for a better look, as well as shining his flashlight over in the darkness. His attention turned towards something in the trees, and he saw two large eyes staring back at him, which were apparently high up. It took him several seconds to find their source, supposedly what looked like legs. It was standing there, completely motionless. At least that's how it appeared to him, and was reflecting light from its eyes. The officer describes the figure as being very tall, well over 7 feet, covered in very fine hair,
Oh, I
having
haven't
long
done.
arms and 2 legs that were proportionally large. It was upright, like a person, hocks in the legs like a dog. The officer claims there is no sound at all, just complete silence from this thing and outside. After observing it for several seconds, he gets back in his car, drives off. He is 100% sure that is what he saw. It was not a bear or anything like that.
Got a lock in this
He has seen bear hunting on his off time multiple times. This was far more canine-like in appearance. The area near where the sighting took place is reportedly known for unexplained sounds and apparently screams.
Melody! Sending me spooky images. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, this is what Melody sent me. I look down and see I have like messages. I click on my Discord and this pops up. Boop. Melody says like that weird Japanese Momo creature meme. Yeah, remember the Momo challenge, right? Yeah. Well, sort of. I never took part of the challenge. Looks like that stew is coming back to bite you. Yes. Stew is good, but it's making me tired. You know what? It's time for a smoke break. And to anyone wondering, this is a rolled pipe tobacco. Is not Mary Jane cigarette. Got her light both sides. And it's, you can tell because it's like regular smoke coming out. And from what I've seen is like, I guess like weed smoke is like thicker. Melody says, have a power nap at the 1 hour mark, Duder. No, I think I want to get this done more than I want to sleep. Just get this done and out of the way for the day. Because tomorrow I gotta go to Shiprock. And I think that's where my mom wants me to get stuffing, stovetop stuffing. Oh, I forgot to tell her about the bacon thing. Yeah, it says one of the best ways to enjoy rolling tobacco is to give the tobacco a little rum. Really? Melody is such an aficionado of booze. Back when I was living in Vegas, she gave me a recipe for spiced rum eggnog. Just bought store bought eggnog, mixed it with spiced rum. It was good. Muy delicioso. Really nice comfort drink. Just sitting back, doing commissions, taking a sip every now and then. After community service is done for the day, I might lie down, but who knows? I might get a second wind before then. This food coma that's trying to come on will like dissipate. Oh, I'm hoping. Yeah, I better try to finish this because it's when it gets this short, it's harder to light back up right next to my fingertips. Man, I should be even. I sh- no, he says I should be. I've been drinking since I was 12. Melody. Oh, says that'll wake you up. Yeah. Oh man, our time in Vegas, just like drawing late into the night and drinking and drawing late into the night. Just draw for hours. Back then, I was just getting like maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep. That was really productive. But here, it's tough, especially since it's cold. Like I'll wake up, my internal clock will wake me up for after 4 hours of sleep, but it's so cold. Like I just snuggle back into my covers and just fall right back asleep. But I'm glad my internal clock has got me on my regular 4 hours, but I'll still put in another hour or two of sleep just because it's so freaking cold. Which is why I need to get myself like a small wood burning stove, set it up in here, warm myself up in the morning, get it nice and toasty, and just keep drawing. It says those were the days. Yes, hours upon hours of non-interrupted drawing sessions. And if I needed to run down to the store real quick, there was like several corner stores right next to where I lived, where I just re up on snacks or booze, grab a simple bite to eat at one of the fast food joints that were just right there. Hop on my bike, be back within about 30 minutes. But here, like everything's so far and out of the way, just getting like a simple task done could take about a good hour or so. Not even. Like the just going down to the convenience store over here is like a 15-minute drive, but if I want something more substantial, it's a 30-minute drive away. So doing like a little bit of grocery shopping that I do sometimes, like will take me over an hour because it's a 30-minute drive there, maybe like 10 or 20 minutes of shopping around, and then a 30-minute drive back. So it takes a good like hour and 30 minutes. Oh, okay. Melody says, or the times I got you some mutton because you missed it so much. Yes, I tell that story fondly. I missed the taste of home, like the home cooking of like mutton. And Melody would dupe me some money in my Kofi account, and then go down to the store, get me some mutton, and just oh, it was so good. It's just another reason I fell in love with Melody because she treats me so well, and she spoils me a lot. You spoil me, Melody. Okay, come on, wake up, wake up. Let's get this done and out of the way for the day. All right.
Coming from the forest. Think like strange cries. The officers also seen strange things before
Iso's
while
back.
patrolling the same area. Footprints, sounds, sightings. Now, I myself have a very good friend who has also reported seeing two large-legged figures covered in fur right around the same location.
Welcome back, Iso.
These figures were standing right next to a tree on the south side of the road, close to the shoulder. The road in this area is curvy. He also said he caught eye shine, and the eyes were very large. We said he probably saw this for about 3 seconds. His headlights caught this, and he is 100% positive he saw something. He said his heart dropped, and he immediately called me while still driving. I knew something unique based on his demeanor and tone had happened. About 45 minutes after he had called me, I went back to the site with him. We brought our dog. Every time we stopped or approached this area where the sighting was, he started to whimper, and the dog would not let us get any closer. As we were getting close and in a place where we could actually pull off and stop, something very loud happened behind us that startled both of us. A loud growl. I swear, it came from one spot, right next to the road, then moved into these trees where it sounded like at least two animals fighting for 5 seconds. That's what my friend said. It made me start talking. Then, his question got cut off by another sound. This disturbance causing our dog to start whining and whimpering.
Hold on. Iso says, no idea why Twitch doesn't send email notifications when you go live always. Oh, Melody says, I only wish I could do more, Floof. Well, you do plenty, love. Can't ask you to do more than you do already. You're just friggin' amazing. Devon Stars jumped in the chat. Says the one and only. Happy to see you there. Yes, thank you. Melody says howdy there. What's up, Devon Star?
Would not go any further. We stood there for a good while listening to the woods, but did
Okay,
not
shit.
proceed further. The area where we parked is very secluded. Nobody was out there. It was like 10 p.m. We knew what we heard. We knew it was not a bear or any other large animal that is known, because of how it sounded. Its proximity to the road, and the fact you could pinpoint its location. It also was moving in a way that made us think a person. This creature seemed aggressive because of what just happened. We then decided to back off into top speed on our vehicle. so we would get out of the area quickly should other disturbances happen, which still caused me to call my friend while driving stupidly fast down this road. The noises stopped, so I felt better. Thank you for your time to read this. I know it was long, but I just want to make sure you had all the information you needed.
Devin Star says all cool drawing some all all cool drawing some fur. Nice. Oof.
I'm going to remain anonymous for this, but I had a sighting of something that I can't explain in 2011, springtime. And during the time, I was working as a police officer for a small town in northwestern Oklahoma. What made me take an interest in this particular case was the description given to me by the witness. It sounded just like how other witnesses have described other abnormals, to include Sasquatch. I had one individual come to the department as they were reporting what they thought they saw appeared to be a man with long black hair, no shirt or clothes, standing near their pond at about 1 o'clock in the morning. Apparently, it looked like they were holding a knife or some sort of weapon. As he noticed them
Lisa
looking
says,
out their
any of
window,
you ever play Halo
he began
multiplayer?
walking into the woodline,
Yes.
disappearing from view nonetheless, never returning, only after several attempts of trying to find him by the reporting party. I'm not sure what he actually had in his hand. I never asked of a description of it specifically, but I began to do some research on my own. I came across several websites dedicated to Bigfoot sightings, where individuals could almost describe perfectly, with many others, what they had seen. In my years as an officer, before retiring from law enforcement, I've come across multiple reports of unusual creatures being seen all throughout Oklahoma, as well as neighboring states. In fact, just last year alone, I had another retired law enforcement officer.
Lisa says, pretty sure yesterday was the first time for me. It was pretty fun and fast paced. Yeah, from what I remember, like it was freaking awesome. It was a blast doing like Halo multiplayer. And had this friend at the time, like, and it was funny because like I would just mess with him in multiplayer. I remember like he was trying to get away and like run toward one of the warthogs to try to like drive and get out of there because he was getting like pelted with bullets here and there by everyone else. And I saw what he was going for, so I got my rocket launcher and I shot the warthog he was going for, and he was like almost there. And I shot the warthog. The warthog just like blew up and just like flipped over, and all I could do was scream and run the other way. Oh god, it was fun. Um, Melody says, "Afraid not, so I'm a sim racer by video game trade." Yeah, Melody's really into her racing sims. Isa says the infinite beta multiplayer is free to play, but sadly it seems quite demanding to run. I haven't played multiplayer in a long ass time, just simply because um, I don't have the hardware to do it.
Tell me all about an experience that their own individual mother in law had while she lived out on a farm near Elk City. She told him about a time she had gone out to her chicken coop and had a face to face encounter with a small monkey type animal, standing on 2 feet without hair. Looked like it was wearing pants. It began making loud sounds before running away. It appeared as if it had jumped over multiple fences, only to disappear into the tree line. I also know that many people have reported seeing humanoid creatures looking similar to how Bigfoot looked and how Bigfoot is described, all through various areas all around Elk City, Shawnee as well, and even the town I grew up in, Guthrie, where witnesses and victims claim these creatures prey on livestock, chickens, goats, pigs, everything. This is also not the only time I've received reports involving unusual creatures that match what has been described by the witness to include Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I'm sure these things happen all the time throughout the US and even other countries throughout the world. However, I'm most familiar with Oklahoma, and it appears to be designated for many areas of things like this. I really doubt a lot of these stories are made up. If you got a chance to sit down and talk to these witnesses, they're terrified. Something is happening here. What could these creatures be? How does somebody prove their existence without anyone ever actually catching one? Do they really exist in different forms? January of 2001, Officer Bradwick encountered what he described as a tall being reminding him of Nosferatu. It terrified him. His story is one of the scariest reports on record. This story has remained unsolved to this day and has had more eyes on it than anything I've ever written about yet. He saw something, and I could tell you fairly certainly that whatever it was could not just be simply explained away. I was driving down the road in Franklin County, Texas. It was around 2:30 in the morning. I had just passed under a streetlight. It was very dim, but I could see everything outside of its illumination. I was looking up at some movement on the right side of the road. There were cow paths through this area, and it looked like something large had ran across my path. I slowed down to about 45 miles per hour, thinking I would let whatever it was pass me if I wanted to cross here. Now, as soon as I did this, what appeared to be a man traveling on all fours jumped up from off the ground, flying and leaping over my car.
Damn.
The being that Bradwick saw was well over 8 feet tall, pale white, and had a sickly looking face and skin. Long claws, eyes that were yellow and green, a very pronounced face, sharp features, bald, sharp pointy ears, and whitish, deathly bluish skin, which is why he made the Nosferatu reference. He said it also kind of reminded him of a vampire bat in the face. Could this be some sort of ancient creature, like a vampire or a demon? Is it out here eating cows? Or perhaps this is the mysterious chupacabra, responsible for draining the blood out of many livestock animals. What do you think? August of 2000. Detective Jason Schaefer says he saw an 8 to 9 foot tall, upright figure at about 1:53 a.m. He was in pursuit of 3 suspicious men in a vehicle. The entity in question was standing in the middle of the road, blocking his way. The detective slammed on his brakes, but got out of the car to make sure that he was not hallucinating. The creature ran, probably about 40 to 50 miles an hour, clearing the highway in 2 leaps. For more than half an hour after this experience, Schaefer's hands shook uncontrollably, to such an extent he could not even hold a cup of coffee. He has not returned to that location since his encounter. It's been speculated that this entity is a form of Bigfoot, but since no other sightings have been reported at the time, I cannot conclude that with any certainty. However, I have heard several stories of what is being called shadow people all throughout the Atlanta area. This leads me to believe that the general population are not coming forward with their own sightings, for fear of ridicule, humiliation, while some do not even know that these entities exist. And I'm sure there are many more people out there who have had encounters or experienced paranormal phenomena, but they just don't realize it. They've never had any prior knowledge of them. This is why I'm sharing his story. Please feel free to share this experience with your friends and family. But remember, keep an open mind. Thank you for taking the time to read about Mr. Schaefer's experience. 8:03 a.m. Officer was dispatched to a disturbance in the downtown area. Upon arrival, was flagged down by a college student who had been walking back to a friend's house. The student stated that she had been walking down the street and heard weird cat-type noises, as if there were 2 large cats fighting around the corner of the apartment building. As she got closer, it sounded as though the fight was moving away from her at a much faster speed. The officer made his way towards the direction that was being described and found nothing upon arriving at said location. Officer then began driving through the neighborhood, hearing no further reports, stopping at one point to observe some kids playing basketball. While stopped and idling, however, he heard and saw what can only be described as a very large, very dark, bipedal animal darting behind one of the buildings. The officer immediately turned around to investigate, but found nothing upon arrival at said location. Note: this has been cross-referenced with a police report from earlier this year, detailing a similar occurrence in January, involving an unknown creature standing on two legs and looking in through an apartment window before disappearing behind the building that it was seen beside. The woman involved in that case stated she had seen previous issues with her cat going missing. This is after behaving strangely for several days on end, preceding each disappearance and death, since this is not the first cat to have happened to. These two cases could not be related, as no direct correlation could be made between either person's statement or their prior history
Some
with any type
squats,
of
some
animal life.
push-ups,
The officer found nothing
few
upon arrival at
stretches.
the location. However, the second sighting occurred within 60 days. As such, it does indeed constitute a second sighting. The animal was characterized by being bipedal, dark in color, with two glowing yellow eyes, which also were described as feline. No further information is exactly available at this time. No correlation between the sightings have been established. A search of the area involved turned up no signs of any animals matching either officer's description. No correlating reports have been made from neighboring precincts. However, further investigation into any possible link with that case from January is currently ongoing. I'll keep looking for anything else that might be related to this one. But right now, everything points toward a dead end on this one too. June 22nd, 2013. Officer Jameson spotted what he describes as a dogman in the middle of a dirt road, standing on its hind legs, looking directly at the officer. This is an interesting case, due to being so close to where I live. The creature, I believe, has been seen many times by locals since 1995, when Officer Jameson had run into this one. I've talked with several people that have seen it, including two that saw the creature at different times, 10 months apart. Both people I've talked to had told me they too had seen a dogman in the area of Kempner. This is in Texas/Cotton, Oklahoma. The area is located just off of US 75 between Crum and Sanger. From talking with several people who live in that area, including a former police officer, the creature had been seen many times all throughout the years. The first time I heard about this creature was from a gentleman who was a local government official of one of the nearby towns. He wishes to remain anonymous. He stated that he had family members who live in Kempner. They had told him of their encounters with the dogman, as well as seeing it chasing several deer on multiple occasions. A little bit more investigating led me to Officer Jameson and his sighting of the strange creature back in '95, as well as recent cell phone pictures taken by an Oklahoma construction worker, detailing and showing an animal standing upright like a man near the I-35 between Durant and Gainesville, heading into Texas. Officer Jameson's encounter with what we believe may be the very same creature prompted me to contact and reach other officials who deal with cryptozoology. We all agree that this may be a dogman, and is possibly related to the two sightings of a strange animal that had been eating livestock in southern Oklahoma, near Lawton, by rangers going back many decades. We believe it may even be responsible for killing and eating two calves in northern Fannin County back in 2011, as well as a horse being killed and partially eaten in Cole County, near Bromede, in 2013. This is after a sighting by a school bus driver on Highway 69, east of Tishomingo, who also saw tracks nearby. After speaking with several locals about the recent encounters, including one family who had also held several possible Sasquatch encounters near their home, my partner and I will be heading up to study the area and search for possible denning sites. Wish me luck. (2001) Officer N writes this. In late 2001, I was patrolling in a mountainous rural area near Las Vegas, New Mexico. My unit, a fully marked police cruiser, was parked on the south side of the road next to some darker woods, while my partner and I sat inside talking while he filled out paperwork. It was about 5 a.m. just getting daylight enough for us to see clearly through the windows without our headlights on. Suddenly, we both noted movement at the edge of the bushes right along where there would be no path or roadway. Something very large began lumbering across the open ground towards us. As it got closer, we could tell it had four legs with hooves, but what really caught our attention were its arms, long muscular forearms swinging back and forth like an ape. The animal covered about 100 yards in the time it took the headlights to circle through the windshield, since we were still sitting idle, and when it cleared the headlights, we could tell it was very, very large, at least 8 feet tall. We both jumped out of the car, with my partner behind me, reaching for his gun while I went towards its direction without drawing my weapon. The animal apparently realized this, taking off into the woods on all fours. However, when I entered into these same woods, attempting to follow it, there was no sign of any tracking or disturbance in the thick brush. This would suggest that somebody had ran through there. I talked to the other officers in neighboring towns who later told me they'd also see reports of a wild man in the area. There were other reports from the same period where horses had been talked about being spooked and large human-like footprints being found alongside of them. Our department has spent about an hour tracking it to no avail, and we never saw it again. 1969. Officer Miller is reported to have encountered a being in the New London County on two separate occasions while patrolling. The first incident took place around midnight, and he saw the creature only 15 feet away from his parked cruiser. It was large, covered with short, dark hair, had no clothes or jewelry on of any kind, and these large gray eyes that glowed similar to the way a flashlight does. The second sighting occurred several months later, after Officer Miller received information about an unrelated incident involving three missing people who were hunting in the area while where he sighted the creature once before. Officer Miller stated that they went out to investigate, setting up some traps for it. They did not find anything, though, due to the heavy rainfall. He claims it was around 5 weeks later, while off duty at home, the telephone rang. It was the deputy sheriff in charge of investigating the missing people, who wanted to know if he had seen anything unusual. Officer Miller said that due to the heavy rainfall, there was no way for it to leave evidence, but told him what he had saw 5 weeks prior. The officer described the creature as being around 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in short dark hair, and a very ugly face. The eyes were also said to be glowing this weird gray faint color. During the summer of 1973, Detective Bradson was called to investigate a complaint about an unknown animal killing livestock. It was first thought to be a wolf or coyote, but that notion was quickly dismissed. While walking through the woods, he came upon what appeared to be large tracks. Followed them as they led into a swamp area with very heavy and thick vegetation. He stated that once he had entered the area, it felt like somebody was watching him, and he had noticed a pair of bright green eyes in the distance. Detective Bradson pulled out his gun, firing a warning shot into the air, but the eyes soon disappeared. He stated that he left when it began to get dark, thinking that whatever that was watching him. It would not bother him if he turned his back on it, so he decided to leave. Bradson described the same creature that was in Miller's report, only 4 years prior to this happening. New Orleans, 2005. There had been a call about an individual that had possibly broken into the home of an elderly person who was now deceased. After further investigation into the case, another call came in standing. There was two suspicious individuals prowling around the property of a boarded-up house near the swamps. The officers responded and found what they described as two men wearing black suits, which stood about 6 feet. They were standing in the shadows when they approached. The police officers both made the decision to shoot at them, but somehow these individuals vanished into thin air. There were no signs of any footprints or how they escaped. There had been nothing that could have provided them a bridge for their escape. No cover or anything nearby that would have allowed them. The area had been searched thoroughly and could not find a single trace of the two men that were described. The second sighting took place just weeks later when another individual who was out late claimed that he had been abducted by an unknown creature. They believe it may have been the same 2 minutes before that they described, creatures being very tall and very pale, with no hair, the face appearing to be more skull-like, but there were still enough features present that they could see it was very human-like. The witness said that it tried to talk to them, but their vocal cords were not made for speaking the language that they heard. They had no clue what language they were speaking, but it was something very different about these creatures than most people would expect to ever find out in the swamps of New Orleans. New Orleans PD officer Mike Farrell stated to the media that he had been able to find any information online about these creatures. It would be unlikely for people to believe their story if they did not see it for themselves. He said that there have also been other sightings in the area, but nothing else substantial as to what was reported by his own partners. There were no traces of blood or any other kind of medical equipment, anything that would have been used to transport the body from the scene where they found it. Their reports seemed to indicate that somebody had just dropped an elderly woman on the front lawn and left her body. Now, the latest story had been relayed by a man who was a senior officer at the New Orleans PD.
Time to switch to
He was an
coffee.
off-duty cop, but had stopped into a local bar to grab something to eat and drink before heading home. While eating, he saw another officer walk in, looking rather disturbed about something that had happened on the shift. The senior officer asked him if everything was all right. He responded by saying they had been sent to do a welfare check on an elderly woman. When they arrived, nobody was at the location. The house did not appear to have been entered, so they went back to check on the vehicle, continuing with surveillance on the property. They noticed a light on in the window, which made them decide to rush into the house. But again, there were no signs somehow of electricity even being turned on or connected, which doesn't make any sense. They checked the entire place, didn't find anyone or anything, so they went back out to resume surveillance. While standing by the front door, an officer said he saw movement in his peripheral. It startled him. He looked into the shadows that were cast by the trees, and he saw movement, which made him believe that something was coming towards them. A second officer stepped closer to see what he was looking at, and both of them realized they were staring at two figures walking up to the house. The first one they described as being very tall, walking with very long strides. The other was quite small in comparison. They are not sure if it was a child or someone shorter than average height. The officers that night decided not to pursue these figures. I think it was a combination of being a little too spooked, and the fact that these figures evaded them by disappearing into the shadows. One of the accompanying officers on the scene also reported a strange electrical feeling in the air,
I think this corn
but wasn't sure if
could
that
be
had
a bit
anything to do
bigger.
with any of these strange occurrences around the elderly woman missing, or the fact that she had no electricity running to her house, yet there were still lights on in the room. All very strange things that cannot be explained. In this report, the officer wishes to remain completely anonymous, but had a sighting of a strange humanoid werewolf-looking creature while patrolling a rural section of Baxter County, Arkansas. The creature had been spotted on a four-way stop by another officer, and as such, the first-handed officer was sent to investigate. When he arrived at the location, the strange-looking humanoid made its appearance, beginning to walk across one of the roads into some nearby brush. As it turns out, this area is part of a long history that includes werewolf-type activity, as well as strange, unexplainable animal deaths and disappearances. There was no time to see how big this creature was. It very quickly disappeared into a nearby wooded area. The officer did make a search of the location and discovered several sets of tracks in the dirt roads. But because it had rained recently, there were not enough for a clear picture of what might have been responsible. The report went on to state, while this particular section does not get its share of strange activity, including other types of animal mutilations and sightings by local residents, this is the only official complaint from an officer thus far. Other officers from the same department have also come forward to discuss their knowledge of the area, including one who claimed that his own
Well, this is
grandfather
just over
had
45
told him
minutes,
about a
dude.
werewolf-type
Thank you,
creature
love.
living around here. Because his
Ugh.
location was so remote, few people ever went there. There were no other reports
Feeling a
until
bit
now.
better, not as sleepy.
Since then, there have been a string of stories from around the world. on some very strange and disturbing creatures, including a few, like on sites like Reddit, where people have also claimed to see werewolf type creatures. Although this is nothing new, as there have been reports of these beings seen back for centuries here in America. There was one interesting note that made this one stand out among all others. That was an incident involving a mother and child who saw what they thought was a Bigfoot moving along near their home just outside of town. They got into position with their camera and began recording. What happened next is something that those who have seen werewolves before will only find it too familiar. The description given sounds like it could be a dog or a wolf that is suffering from mange, possibly, which causes hair loss and other physical ailments. However, there is one important note here, and it has to do with the apparent bad smell that was given off by this sickly looking animal. That's right. Dogmen, Bigfoots, werewolves, they've all been reported in association with some very bad odors, and this particular sighting seems more than likely when you consider its location. There have been reports of similar sightings around these parts, so people do live in here and are aware of what they might be seeing. Yet another report involved two separate officers, each having their own stories to tell about the incidents they've had while patrolling this particular part of Arkansas, with most of these reports occurred during the night. Although there is very little known about these encounters, most people who have seen them describe them as being around 5 to 6 feet tall, looking very gaunt and thin. There's also a mention of glowing eyes, which, if you read many reports, seems to be a common link among all these types. One officer stated that he had been out in the same area, and he saw something moving quickly through the trees. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but then another report came over his radio about a Bigfoot sighting nearby, so this was close enough to make him feel uneasy about what he might actually have seen. And yet another report. A Cessna pilot was flying his small plane at about 5 a.m. He came upon what looked like a huge hairy creature that had also been spotted by several other pilots in this rural region of Arkansas. This particular officer stated that people who live in these areas have been telling stories for years now about how they've encountered these strange creatures, and even some said they knew of some who hunt them. Out of the most interesting encounters I found, this one involved a police officer from the Calhoun County who responded to an animal complaint one evening near the town of DeQuincy. As he arrived on scene, he saw two sets of eyes coming up from behind a nearby tree, which he described as being extremely bright. This was the first sighting of what he thought was a huge canine type creature, but then it opened its mouth and let out this unearthly growl, causing him to back up in fear. The officer who saw this said that whatever it was, it must have been 8 feet tall, grayish dark smoky fur all over its body. And lastly, the final sighting occurred on Highway 165 near Wilmer, where another cop had responded to a call about kids who claimed they'd seen a Bigfoot or werewolf type of person. According to their description, this thing had very long arms, raccoon or human like hands, and it was enough to scare the officer away from the sighting. On the evening of July 7th, 2007, police officer Jim Corder was patrolling an area of the swamp in Lauderdale County, Mississippi. He noticed two red dots reflecting in his headlights. The object turned out to be an animal which appeared similar to that of.
Hold on. Issa says dot dot dot. Melody says, "What's up, Iso?" Issa says, "Did he just say Kasni as Gesni? Gesna? Kesna as Gesna? I don't know what either of those are. Or is that how Kesna is actually supposed to be pronounced? Now I'm not sure if I have always said it wrong. Kesna or Gesna. I heard him say Kesna pilot, but I don't know what that is. Is Kesna a type of plane? I'm curious now. Oof. Ew. Is it? I wonder if it's just this cup of coffee, but somehow it just smells all It's got this distinct mildew smell to it. Like the previous cup of coffee I had this morning, it wasn't that bad. It didn't smell like that. But this cup of coffee, it's like when I take a sip, like I get this mildew smell in my nose. I guess it's just the type of coffee it is. Because earlier, like the previous cup of coffee, didn't have that issue. Because this is like the coffee I had earlier was like brewed coffee from um like a thing of like Folgers, but the coffee I'm drinking now is instant, so I just had to like pour hot water in with the instant stuff. Take another sip and it doesn't smell as distinct. But it was just those sips earlier where it's like I got this pungent mildew smell in my nose when sipping this coffee. Maybe it's just a shock to my senses from like the the complete switch of like types of coffee it was. Like I was used to drinking the regular coffee earlier, and then switching to instant for this cup of coffee. Maybe that's what it is. It was just like too much of a shock to my senses, because maybe my taste buds and my um, sense of smell was expecting the same type of coffee, but seeing as how this is instant, maybe there's like a subtle shift in the aroma and the taste, which shocked my taste buds and smell receptors to like think it was like some sort of like weird mildew smell. Anyway, what was I looking up? Oh, Kesna. Kesna pilot. Oh, maybe it is a type of plane. Okay, yeah, I just typed in Kesna and it's a it's a propeller plane. Kesna, from car sales to aircraft. Okay, I see. do, 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 do. Oh yeah, Isa says it's an airplane manufacturer. Isa says head to Google, and Google says it's a sound at start not G. Now you're making me want some coffee. I said, ew. Still got some yesterday's coffee I could microwave. No idea how recommended that is though. Also should heat up some frozen pizza soon. Yes, frozen pizza. Got some weird one with potato in it. Potato pizza? Weird. I've seen some like some cast iron skillet recipe for like a potato pizza. It's like you make a dough with potato in it, or no, was it you make the dough? Oh yeah, yeah. You chop up like potatoes, like you make the regular pizza dough and everything, and you put it in the cast iron, and you mash up some potatoes, and you put that in there along with the regular pizza toppings like the marinara whatever meats you want on your pizza, like pepperoni, and then like the mozzarella cheese, and then you top that off with the rest of the dough. So really, you're like making like a cast iron pizza pie, cast iron potato pizza pie, and you grill that over the stove in the in the cast iron skillet for a certain amount of time, and then you have to flip it. Once the bottom is all nice and golden, crispy, you flip it, and then you fry it like cook it in the cast iron that much longer to get the other side of it all nice and crispy. And when the person plated it and cut into it and pulled out a slice, it looked so freaking delicious. But I gotta wonder, like, what would a potato pizza taste like? I mean, it looked good with all that melty cheese and the mashed potato in there, marinara, pepperoni. Like, looked pretty darn freaking good. Maybe I gotta give it a shot. Um, Jesus says Googling how to pronounce Cessna says it's pronounced like Cessna. Weird. Cessna. Cessna plane. All right. Huh. Lisa says, also didn't know if you Google how to pronounce a word, Google gives examples in both British and American English. And Melody says, potato roasty. Is that what it's called? It sounds good. Sounds delicious. Oh, man. My headache went away. Earlier, like I was having somewhat of a headache and I was like fearful that, oh man, is my cold having a resurgence right now? It better not be. I'm just getting over it. I took some aspirin, took a couple of aspirin. My headache is gone. And I'm feeling a little more awake, so that's good. Yay. Okay.
An alligator, but had legs and arms with thumbs on each hand. According to reports, it walked upright like a human being, or like a man. The sighting lasted for about 20 seconds before the creature quickly moved off into the darkness under the tree canopy. Officer Corder stated that there were no houses in the immediate vicinity, and that this was not far from one of several alligators were spotted earlier in the week. He said that there's no way it could have been mistaken for any other type of animal. Corder immediately reported the incident to his supervisor, who was completely surprised by what he had said. A chopper with thermal imaging devices was requested after daybreak, but nothing could be found or the following morning. It's speculated that this creature was the lizard man, also in part of the Mothman legend. Supposedly, one of the first lizard man sightings came from an oil rig worker who saw it crossing nearby in Scarberry, West Virginia in December. Local residents claim there are caves along the swamps where bodies were taken to be experimented on during World War II, all done by Japanese scientists who were brought here for the purpose under Operation Paperclip. Some believe these experiments created what are now called lizard men, but keep in mind it's all speculation. Of course, there's other infamous cases, like the 1980s lizard man of Scape Ore Swamp in South Carolina, detailing a young man who stopped on the side of the road to deal something with his car. When out of the swamp came a large humanoid lizard that chased him. Yet there was another encounter. A man claimed he was hunting in the swamp, and he saw something that looked like what he described as a 7-foot tall lizard walking out into the swamp, turning to look at him before wading off into the water. This is a not so popular account, and easily is overshadowed by the young man's, although this hunter's account came roughly 3 years after the boy's did. He claims it had scales, bright green eyes, and was only about 30 feet away from him. When shown the drawing of the young boy from the Scape or swamp situation in 1984, he said it looked identical. Another local resident who claims to have seen this creature states, I don't know what I saw, but whatever it wasn't human, and it has scared me so bad. I'm still afraid to go back out there alone. Sightings of similar creatures have been reported in many of the areas around the world: Central and South America, Africa, Australia, Japan, and China. In most cases where witnesses have been able to give detailed descriptions, it's been closely related to a bipedal reptile with scales. Even Native Americans have told their stories about these creatures. They speak of a giant lizard-like monster that hunts and eats humans, especially human children. Some cultures held lizardmen as gods, while others believed them to be man-eaters and more like animals than men, while others believed them to be demonic deities. Lauderdale County Sheriff Billy Soley states, "We're not saying this thing doesn't exist. We just haven't come up with any evidence yet to
Oh,
prove it.
Melody says roasting
Those
is
who live in
shredded
or near this
potatoes and
area
then pan
claim they
fried,
will continue
basically
looking
hash
until they
browns.
find some
Ooh,
evidence." In
ooh.
conclusion of this report,
I think I've
I would
made
like to state that there
some
are
of
many
those.
other first-hand reports of witness sightings, experiences, and encounters. These should not be taken lightly, as they could very well cause panic if released to the wrong people or put into the wrong hands. If you have any more information detailing this creature, or know anybody who has had an encounter with it, please contact me by email.
I think I can improve this shot. I can improve it by lots.
There is several sightings reported all around Sedgwick County, all by different law enforcement officials. Sightings are rare, but they do happen. The day of October 17th,
Oh,
2010,
maybe I better
yet
just
another
wash my
officer
mug
working out of
after I'm done
Sedgwick
with this
County
cup of
had
coffee.
his very own sighting. He was on patrol in the backwoods of the Wichita area, and he saw something that will never leave him. An unknown, large, horned humanoid was seen by this officer, and it is hard to believe what he wrote in the report, what really happened. At approximately 7 a.m., I was dispatched to an abandoned residence for a suspicion person call. I arrived at the location, did not see anybody or anything suspicious around the house, so I ran tracks north into some nearby woods along with Sergeant. As we were tracking, I believed and I saw something along the east hilltop through the brush. I could not tell what it was, but I thought it was a person hunched over, moving northbound behind some covering. I alerted Sergeant A to be on the lookout for whatever it was that I had seen. Sergeant A caught up to where I was at, asked me, "What did you see?" As he approached, both of us clearly heard very heavy footsteps coming from our 10 o'clock position. We saw nothing, so we proceeded west towards our vehicle, where we would have had better lighting to investigate the area, because whatever this thing or person was, they were being extremely cautious in their movement. Both Sergeant and I saw what appeared to be an extremely tall, 6-foot grayish or possibly brown colored subject, standing upright but hunched over. As this being noticed our presence, it turned to its left side, as if it was attempting to conceal itself with some tree coverage. Sergeant A asked me if I had seen the same thing that he just saw. We both then observed what happened to be a large set of horns pointing out from around its head area, very reminiscent to a goat or ram. What we saw next froze us in our tracks. This being lifted up its right arm over its head, which allowed us to see that it had a huge hand with large black claws. It resembled a paw, but much more like that of a hand. There are no reports that match this particular sighting, but the area has a plethora of Bigfoot sightings reported by other officers, and yet another sighting report by a deputy sheriff. He was called by a citizen reporting Bigfoot activity in the area. The deputy sheriff met the witness at the location where the sighting had taken place. The deputy describes what he saw. As he started to investigate the area, my partner and I clearly saw something standing about 200 yards away from us. It did not appear human. We could only see its head and shoulders, as it appeared to be looking into a ravine, or possibly at something coming up out of the ravine. What I remember seeing are two very bright eyes above some vegetation. My partner stated, "It's Bigfoot." We both took off toward an open field nearby, trying to cut it off before it got back over the hillside close to Highway 54, but we lost sight of it. My partner went up to the spot where we had seen it, staying back near the ravine, thinking that Bigfoot was still standing at the bottom of our viewing area. My partner stated, "I don't see anything." We both began to walk toward each other, and as we did, we noticed a very large grayish colored subject looking above us from an embankment. It seemed to be watching us, as if curious about what we were doing. The creature then ran down into a heavily wooded area, on top of a hillside, which would have put it close to the highway again, even though my partner and I were fairly deep into this open field, with no trees or other obstacles between us and it. My partner and I both got a clear look at it running away from us. It did not stand up and walk like a human does, but it did appear to be on two legs, although its speed was very incredible for something large. I have been in law enforcement for over 22 years now, and I've never had anything come close to happening like this did. Other than evidence left behind, we did not get any pictures or videos of the creature, but my partner, I think, got some footage while we were chasing what we thought was going to be a Bigfoot back into the wooded area after having lost sight of it earlier when we first ran through the brush trying to cut it off before it got past us. Unfortunately, he lost access to that camera, taken by his supervisors. My partner and I both felt that the creature knew which direction we would go to cut it off, so by going in opposite directions, it caused us to split up, allowing it time to get away from us. During this encounter, I was wearing my uniform but not my body armor or equipment belt, which can be limiting at times, especially when trying to chase someone or something heavily through the brush. I have read the sighting report filed by Officer
Now
B,
this says just under half an
which
hour.
also
Nearly
reported a
there.
large upright grayish colored subject,
Yes.
only about 20 feet away from him, at around 8:25 in the morning, near Highway 54, just outside of Sedgwick County, Kansas, on December 5th, 2011. This is also right around the same time, approximately, that myself and my partner were chasing a very large unknown subject through the field. My partner and I both heard something walking through the tall grass around us, moving in another direction. It sounded far too heavy to be a human. We did not hear it running, but we did get a clear view of it, approximately 150 yards away from us, looking down. That's a day I'll never forget. This report details an unusual and frightening nighttime encounter with a large canine creature during an overnight patrol shift by two Dallas County Sheriff's Office police deputies. The report states that the officers, parking on the shoulder of 135 southbound, underneath Interstate 35, between mile markers 142 and 141, near West Des Moines, Iowa, at around 2:30 a.m., as they observed northbound traffic, a very large and identified canine creature emerged from some nearby cornfields, headed towards their vehicle. The first deputy stated that it ran across the road in front of them very, very quickly. He estimated that it was about 30 yards away before disappearing into the black. The animal made no sound as it approached, or when it crossed the highway. He said that not only was its gait unlike a dog, but it was very large and covered a wider distance with each stride. Further, its light tan coloring blended in with the gravel road. The deputy also stated he noticed some unusual features, such as very long hair, like a horse's mane, down the middle of its back. He considered this to be abnormal for a canine creature, as all the other dogs have seen short hair on their backs. The second deputy said that she first saw the animal at about 45 degrees from her right window as it crossed directly in front of them, without ever slowing down or deviating from its straight path. She estimated that it ran at least 30 feet before becoming obscured by darkness as it entered a cornfield alongside the interstate. She also said that she noticed long hair from its back as well. The first deputy stated that the animal's gait was not normal for a canine, as it traveled much wider than a man with each stride, and that during the few moments before it entered the field of corn, he could not make out any discernible features, but did notice an odd coloration, which matched the ground. He added that this creature was like a bipedal German shepherd, but very, very large. Both officers were able to observe this creature for only a few short seconds before it disappeared ultimately into the darkness. They described a very moonlit night, with pretty good visibility. The very first deputy felt he had seen something unusual, but both officers decided to maintain radio silence about their sighting, out of concern they would be perceived as crazy. Afterwards, the first deputy immediately asked to do a search on Google Earth for any Iowa landowner who may have used horses in an unusual manner, which could indicate a possible connection with this canine. He said he quickly located what appeared to be a horse stable surrounded by cornfields nearby, discovered it belonged to a man who was originally from Arizona and had experience with such animals like mountain lions, bears, and even skinwalkers, apparently. The deputy decided to make further inquiries to this lead. However, he did not want to risk being seen as suspicious or appear as if this primary purpose was for getting information related to the sighting. The owner of the property declined an interview. The Des Moines County Sheriff's Office, Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and a senior biologist from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources was unable to identify any native species which matched this officer's description. A Texas veterinarian who specializes in examining hair samples was consulted, but stated that she would need a blood sample or tissue sample for proper analysis. The first deputy obtained some hair found on the shoulder of 135 southbound. However, it was disposed of after being improperly preserved due to procedural error. A second attempt at obtaining a sample from that area, although another source proved unsuccessful as well. In August of 2010, I had my very own sighting of something similar while working third shift patrol with another deputy for Dallas County Precinct 3, Constable's office near Forney, Texas. I was stopped at the intersection of County Road 298 and Stell Bridge Road, facing eastbound on CR 298, with my emergency lights activated. I observed something unusual traveling northbound off to my left, or north, in a small wooded area. At first, it looked like it might be a large armadillo or some other form of rodent that had crawled into the brush for shelter. But this thing was moving very fast, and it was moving through thick undergrowth. It didn't seem too large at first, but it certainly kept its distance across the drainage ditch as it continued northbound towards me at about 15 miles an hour, zigzagging back and forth between trees, sometimes losing ground. As it got closer, I noticed that this creature, too, had a long mane and shaggy hair, reminding me of a horse, but the motion was different. The most unusual thing I observed about this animal is that it seemed almost alien and robotic in its movements, walking upright on two legs, but with very long strides, like how somebody would run through tall grass while pretending to be Tarzan or something. As it approached my location, about 65 feet away, I got out of my vehicle, and I could hear some dogs barking in the distance. It would seem like the same time when this thing emerged from the trees on the other side of CR 298. After observing me, this thing turned around, running back into the brush, where it disappeared, with an expression on its face like, "Uh-oh, I didn't mean to be caught." As far as size, I would estimate it to be roughly 5 feet tall, but very slender, covered with thick hair. I remained on the scene for about 15 minutes afterwards, thinking the same thing might exit the brush on the other side, but it never did. I felt if there were any aggressive thoughts in its mind towards me, simply because I was a stranger, it could have easily taken me down, since we were only separated by a ditch and several trees. Witnesses who live in that area report that they frequently see stray dogs and feral hogs near their homes. People dump unwanted pets into this woods all the time, but nobody seems to know what this thing actually is. Maybe all those pets make for a food source, of whatever that is. Now, a third deputy had also reported seeing tracks, which he believed to be from the same creature at a very similar location. After several weeks, though, of attempting to relocate the tracks, they were lost. I find it strange that this is not more widely known about, since I've been told by state and local authorities numerous people have reported seeing something very similar over the years in that area. A few others claim to have heard extremely loud screams, which sound like a woman being murdered, coming from deep in those same woods. Since there's never been any evidence found of violent deaths or missing persons who match the description, official explanations for these events usually range from wild dogs and coyotes to escaped exotic pets, such as monkeys and lions. However, some locals believe it could be an undiscovered species that we know nothing about, such as a Sasquatch or an undocumented breed of primate. The only clue we have ever found was a single set of prints, which were discovered to be from a man's work boot, maybe accidentally dropped during his normal duties. Perhaps there really is something out there, and it could be right under our noses. This report details the sighting made by a police officer to an apparent bipedal canid in a suburban township of a large city along the Navajo. The original sighting came from two boys who were riding their bicycles. They spotted what they thought was a man walking with a dog, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was not a man. It wasn't very long after this that an officer also reported seeing something very similar during his own patrol shift. It had been raining for some time, so there was plenty of mud to have casted footprints, and possibly even made impressions upon leading up to the officer's first encounter. The police officer first noticed some sort of unusual activity at around 7:30 p.m. on May 23rd, 2011. It was very shortly after this he got out of his vehicle to investigate, leaving the engine running in case he needed to make a quick getaway. The officer had seen something large beneath some trees on the other side of a wire fence that had been knocked down beneath the power lines. As it looked up at him, he saw what appeared to be a
Just
canine,
over
but
15
standing on two
minutes.
legs instead
Yes.
of four.
You know what I think it might be? This whole mildewy smell? It can't be the cup because I was drinking coffee beforehand and I didn't have this issue. But I'm wondering if it's the coffee maker because the cup of Joe I was drinking earlier this morning came from the coffee pot, which we use like every day. And the cup I brewed just now is from the single portion of it. Because we have this coffee maker where it has the coffee pot where you can brew a whole pot of coffee, and then the singles portion on the side where you can just brew like a single cup of coffee. I'm wondering if that's the issue. Maybe that side has to be cleaned out because I don't know when the last time it was cleaned out because it's not used that often. So I'm thinking that since it's last use, maybe that's the portion that got all mildewy or whatever. So if that's the case, I gotta clean that side out. And if in fact it is mildewy, then I should probably stop drinking this cup of coffee right now because I keep getting that sense. It's like I'll drink it and then like I'll get this musk of mildewy odor in my face. So I had better like just clean that portion out, like either with some sort of like cleaning solution or shoot, I think hydrogen peroxide would work. Just make a mixture of water and hydrogen peroxide and just run it through a bit. Just kind of like have it sitting there with the hydrogen peroxide solution and then just let it run and just kind of clean the system out. I think that'll do it because I keep getting that smell maybe. Melody says filter maybe is gunked. Well, like the filter is like this little basket where we just clean it out, but I think maybe some water, some still water had been in the on that side of the coffee brewer for maybe a night or two because sometimes it won't brew all the water and send it through. So I think that might be it. Because I'm sitting here sipping this coffee, thinking, what is the issue? I know it's not my cup, and I've been speculating on whether it's the. I'm noting the difference between the pot of coffee and then the single like instant coffee, but it hasn't gone away. Like it keeps hitting me in the face every now and then. So it's got to be maybe some mildew grew overnight or something from the last use on the singles side of the coffee maker. So I'm going to go ahead and dump out this coffee, and then after I'm done here with my community service stream, go ahead and clean that side out. I'll probably have to wash out my mug too because it's tainted with that smell now. Yeah, yeah, it smells all mildewy in there now. Whoop. No, it says use boiled water as well and leave it in there until it turns cold. Yeah, I'm also going to see if I can just like run hydrogen peroxide through it, like do a hydrogen peroxide water solution and just let it sit in there for like a couple of hours and then just start running it through and then just running clean water through it. Anyway.
The creature did not stay around for too long. There's no more information about its exact size or weight available.
Ooh, Melody duped me a little animation in Discord. Let me check it out. Oh, it's like a Rouge the Bat animation. If it'll load, I'd like to see it. Impressive wingspan. It's just stuck on the first frame. Oh, there we go. There we go. Pretty smooth. The animation quality is pretty alright, but I think I prefer it to be more stylized. Like it's really more humanized than I usually see some of these. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
It was described as being at least 6 feet tall, reddish brown fur all over its body, which could be
No,
interpreted
this
by
is
some
still more
people
cool though.
as
Yeah,
being
she
fur-like.
is.
Whatever this creature was, it sure knew how to quickly escape from the officer, as there's no clear information on its speed or general mannerisms. The boys immediately had called their father, described what they had seen as a tall man. The sighting drew a lot of attention to the area, and soon other people began reporting seeing similar creatures. In fact, a Navajo tribal officer also witnessed what he would call a skinwalker, reported it to be at least 6 to 7 feet tall and walking around the same neighborhood, although that was a separate incident altogether and occurred right after some time after the boys' own sighting. This report included a statement by a third witness, who claimed the creature may have been used for some sort of camouflage or stealth while hiding in some trees or brush about 50 feet away. Shortly before seeing the officer, this man said he had heard dogs barking and howling in a terrible way. This bipedal canine was also described as being covered in dark hair that was more reddish brown. This eyewitness account came from an 18-year-old Navajo male who claimed to have also seen the creature on May 24th, 2011, right around 12:30 a.m. near his home. It is unknown whether or not all three witnesses were together during any part of their sighting, but it seems likely due to the creature's size being so similar. The police officer's sighting happened within less than a mile away from where these two others had saw this. Thanks to Lyle Blackburn for his assistance with this report. On March 22nd, 2013, Officer Mike Milnor was checking out a report of missing livestock in the area around Luca Chukai, Arizona. Officer Milnor and Navajo officers joined in on the search and investigation in an attempt to find some clues as to where they could find where the animals had been taken, since there was no sign of any dead animals immediately. It wasn't long when Officer Larry Wanuka came upon heavy footprints, which would eventually conclude belonged to only one set of tracks. These tracks led them towards a valley along two cliffs, which were close together. It was there they found where the mutilated animals had been killed and taken, their throats ripped open, and tongues removed. Officer Milnor climbed up into one of the cliff's areas, armed with his rifle, keeping watch of what he believed to be more than one of these things here. What happened next was simply amazing. The officer would tell cryptozoologists exclusively that while he
Hold on. Issa says, Rouge the Bat sounds risky. It's not the whole one, is it? I don't know what that reference is. So I guess not. It's just a fan animated Rouge the Bat, and she's like more human than um, I've actually seen her. Like I prefer to be more stylized and cartoony. But other than that, like the animation itself is pretty smooth. And then Issa says, "Ooh, pizza, BRB."
was at his
So
post,
I don't know if
he
he
heard the
heard
sound of
any of
something
that.
large walking towards him. He said this: I couldn't see anything, but I kept hearing it get closer and closer. I turned on my light and saw this very large dark figure about 15 to 20 feet away.
About 4 minutes left.
He describes it as being huge, but having nothing specific.
I'm like looking at the clock because I've been drinking a lot of liquids, trying to flush out the rest of my system of this cold, and I need to take a leak here pretty soon. But we're almost done with these
Features.
last
Not
2
even eyes or a
hours
mouth,
of community
just
service.
plain skin all over its body, completely naked. No genitalia of any kind either. And once spotted, before the officer could promptly react, the being darted off. It was just a crazy moment. I've been working in the area for about 10 years now. I've never heard of or seen anything like that. I've heard of talk of skinwalkers, but I never thought that that's what they would look like, assuming that was a skinwalker. He adds that he does not believe it was a skinwalker, but admits he's not the most educated person when it comes to Navajo mythology and folklore. However, his department chief is well aware of what has been seen and states they do know who the creature might be referencing, one particular shaman. At first, we all laughed it off, Officer Milnor concludes. But after seeing what this thing did to our animals, there's no doubt in my mind, whatever this is, it does exist. Keep in mind, there's been a lot of speculation before about skinwalkers. Sure, many of the Navajo people believe them, but a lot of the state and law enforcement officials do not. Back in 2009, a video that supposedly showed one upright walking man went viral. This is apparently the first time that an officer had ever had an up-and-close personal encounter with what might be one of these creatures. The FBI put out documents back in 2011 about skinwalkers, but they were not taken seriously at all and were shut down before ever reaching mainstream media. These documents were leaked at some point, but are now almost impossible to find. The Navajo Nation Police Department, otherwise known as NNPD, was contacted for their take on the story, but no comment was made at the time of publication. Whatever the case may be, the NNPD is being very careful on what they choose to publicize and what they choose to respond to, and trying to downplay any stories they are accused of. Two deputy sheriffs believe that they have seen a tall, dark figure just outside the city limits of Oceanside, California. They both stated that they were viewing this creature standing on the other side of an 8-foot tall chain link fence. The officers state they saw it moving its head back and forth, as if looking around at the area. This is when one of the deputies decides to go get his light for more illumination. When he returned, he says that whatever it was on the other side of the fence had moved off into some bushes out of sight range, leaving him with no idea of what he had just witnessed. Another sighting comes from two teenagers who were driving alongside Beach Boulevard in Oceanside on the 14th. They spotted what they thought was a bear on the side of the road, but this soon proved to be incorrect. One of the teens stated that he got out his light, shined it at the thing only to find that there were no eyes. This is when they both ran back to their car and took off in fear, not wanting to see any more. During November of 2012, there had also been numerous UFO sightings all across California. Could these so-called sightings be related somehow? People are always reporting strange lights over cities here in America. What makes these reports any different? What do you think about all these weird happenings taking place today? Is this some sort of warning or sign for humans? Or are people simply making these up because we're desperate for attention? They went on to mention that there were several people that had filed reports of tall, dark figures in the area. They also stated that they were not sure if these incidents were connected, but it seems highly possible since they occurred on the same day. Now, our final report comes from yet another deputy from Graham County, Arizona. He states that while he was on duty around 3 in the morning, he heard a very strange noise coming from outside this location. When he went to investigate what the sound could have been, he says there was a tall, dark figure standing out there in front of him
Oh,
near an
it's
old
time.
abandoned meat facility.
Sweet.
What makes this sighting unique?
And that concludes my community service for the day. I gotta open my timesheet so I can keep log of this stuff again. It's been a while. But anyway, yeah, hope you all enjoyed. Uh, if you like what you saw, if you want to donate to this endeavor of like me reanimating these stories, your donation would be very much appreciated. Because I'm only one man. I can only do so much, and doing community service along with commissions is really running me ragged. But if I were able to get paid for the community service I'm doing by crowdfunding support to like go toward funding this project, I'd be very much appreciated. Link a link to my Ko-fi site where you can donate monies is in the section below. So please go there, donate some mullahs, whatever you can, like $1 or so. It's fine, but any more would be like much appreciated. But yeah. Anyway, this has been Johnson Black Horse, the one and only, and I shall check you all later. Sweet. Bye.